Welcome, dear friends and friends of gartenschlau.com. My name is Bernd, and today I want to tell you a bit about what to pay attention to when the orchids have faded at home and what you need to cut off. You have to, can, should, or may, and whether you actually need to cut anything at all. What do you need for that? Everything. Of course, a tool, a lighter, and that's pretty much it. You need the lighter and the tool for that, so that you can disinfect the blade, which you do when you have several plants. Disinfects between the individual plants. To do this, you simply hold the lighter under the blade. A few times through on both sides. It actually works very quickly, and that disinfects the blade then. Disinfect it, or the knife, depending on what you use. What kind of orchids do we have, and what should we pay attention to? Here we have a dendrobium. The flowers are already drying out now. You can of course speed up the whole process a bit by simply pinching the flowers out. You can also cut them out. In principle, you really don't have to do that, because sooner or later they just fall off. But you can do it. Here is the flower shoot between the leaves. And now I can just go ahead with the scissors. And just like that, the first wilted flowers away. Here we have the whole thing. And that also has the further advantage that the plant, at least as long the flowers are gone, because it can't pump any more energy in. Here the same thing. Then the flowers are gone. Here there would even have been one that is just starting to dry out, and during that time, as long as it's still attached, there's of course the possibility that the plant is still pumping more energy in. And then it can at least use it better for the flowers down here. I had a post before. It was just about the method, how to get Phalaenopsis orchids to bloom again. This one has just formed one, or rather two, new flower shoots. That means I'm not cutting anything back there, of course. When it is wilted now, what do we need to pay attention to? Whether the shoot tips on the flower shoot are still active. You can tell by that they look green and fresh and are not dried out. Or the alternative is, you can see these everywhere. I'm going to call it scales. And under these are hidden the dormant eyes. And usually you cut the shoot off like this, that you still have 3 dormant eyes. If this were a wilted shoot, I would even be inclined to do that here. That you might leave a 4th or 5th eye, since they are relatively close together. I would leave it. This is the topic regarding Phalaenopsis. Put it back down. The leaves are hanging a bit. Next is everything related to Odontoglossum and Psydium. These are all orchids that are currently fading. To deal with, these are all orchids that are currently fading. These are all orchids where the flower spike will dry out sooner or later. Anyway, that means you can cut it however you like. The likelihood, if you cut back here, I'm going to do this just above the 3rd eye. Cutting back that something is coming out here is significantly lower than with Phalaenopsis. You can give it a try. It can happen, but usually it doesn't. That means that's why you can cut the shoot all the way down. And that way you ensure that the plant no longer puts any energy into this. The flower spike comes in. The same goes for Ellie. That's the case with Glossum. This is the plant from the last video as well. I'm not cutting anything there because the flower spike is currently developing. If you take this plant here, compare it here, you can see, I hope you can see it in the video. If you look at it, everything is dead, so you really don't need to do anything. That means you could cut off this flower spike. Now, of course one could complain. The fact that I had the knife and did not disinfect the scissors between the orchids. That's obviously bad. That's why we just do it in between, so now we're always on the safe side. This means that with this compartment, you can just remove the flower spike. And here, the plant isn't pumping any more energy into it either. Which you can then do is when you already have such a plant in your hands, just remove the old leaves. Now I'm just going to hang it up here for a moment. Here we have our Sideria, Japonica Itz ex Bandopsis parisi. It needs to bloom first. It's similar to Phalaenopsis, although the likelihood is very low that the flower spike, the tip remains active. That means you can try it with one eye that you leave behind, but even that is rather unlikely. You would use the same approach if I had a flower spike here for demonstration. Blütengrieb for eye demonstration. With everything that's going on towards Wanda, when it comes to Asconcentrum or Renantara, you can theoretically cut back the flower spike. But in general, as you can see here now, you cut back the old shoots. Simply for the reason that the plant doesn't waste energy unnecessarily. Then, as the last planted, everything that involves Cattleya, Lea, Sophronitis, where Sophronitis is anyway, the flower spikes are so short. Usually, you don't need to cut anything. You can see it here, there's still one. Old shoot, you can leave that one, obviously, it doesn't bother anything. And you would just cut this one out as well. And usually, if you're not sure what you should do with the plant regarding the flowers or the flower spikes, then you just let the plant keep growing and you'll see whether the flower spike or the flowers be thrown off and whether the drive. That can potentially lead to new flowers. This can be the case with Phragmipedium, also known as ladies' slippers, that they are what you call revolver bloomers, that keep blooming more and more on the same shoot. Exactly. So, if you're not sure, if you don't have any experience with the plant species, with the orchid species, then just let the plant do it for you. That it then, let's say, just lets the shoot die off. Then you'll see the shoot is, if it's brown and dry, then you can cut it out. If you see that the shoot is still active, then just leave the flower spike as it is. So, that was it on the topic of what you can cut back, or not, with orchids when they are done blooming. And whether you can get them to bloom again. If you have questions, not necessarily about the species, but about other orchid species, then write it down in the comments, and otherwise, see you next time. Bye.